Welcome back to the Own Your Awkward podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vargo, and every episode we get into what has made our guests vulnerable and how they've learned how to own their awkward in order to live their best life. Stay tuned so you can hear every awkward moment in today's show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Own Your Awkward podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vargo, and today we have the very awesome LinkedIn disruptor, philosopher, and just all-around great person, Deb Helfrich. Deb, how are you doing today?
Oh, Andy, it's so great to be here and chat with you. I am really looking forward to talking about pivoting any awkward.
I love that. I love the structure that you give toward the idea of pivoting, because it's just that phrase is so empowering to think about taking something and moving it a different direction.
Yeah,
and you know I'm all about awkward.
Say, hey, well, the phrase, it's own your awkward, but then the person is still left going shrugging their shoulders, and so how do I do that? Well, you pivot. Right? You own it, and then you pivot, and you keep owning and owning and owning, because that's what it is about being a unique person. You're always leaning away from the crowd, and that takes the skills to pivot, that balance.
Right. Well, it does, and like you said, you have to keep working it, and that's the thing I think that we forget so much, is that it's not just you arrive at a destination and here I am and I'm okay with the world and everything and myself, because you walk into a different room and now you realize something else bothers you about yourself or something else you're not as comfortable with, and then you do have to pivot.
It's the whole point of, well-being philosophy. The principle is, stop using the measurements of the past to wonder why right now is falling short. You're going to be dynamic, be flowing, and then life gets a lot easier, quite frankly.
Oh, for sure. I was listening to a podcast not too long ago, and I wish I could remember so that I could give them credit. I'll have to look it up and add it into the comments. But their whole point, this lady was talking about how if you haven't achieved your goals, the only reason you haven't is because you haven't taken enough massive action. And at some point, once you've taken enough action, it will happen, and you just have to keep doing it and keep plugging away. And I think about that a lot of times when I haven't reached a goal or something hasn't happened. I think, well, there's obviously more that I can do to make it happen, and eventually it will happen. So,
yeah,
Deb, in a minute,
I
I'm
think
going to...
that hustle is an interesting concept that, that's what the structure is of modern work, is the, keep massive, do. But that's actually not the only way. There's a more of a flowing water, like find the path that needs to get taken sort of approach. And neither's right or wrong, neither's better or worse. But, there's that environmental thing that, what does the environment support? If you keep pressing against a boulder, at some point the right action is to step back and say, I can't possibly as a human move that mountain.
Yeah, no, that's a
that
good perspective.
That kind of perspective, that's a pivot. That's right there. That is an example of the pivot that enhances life and it empowers life, right?
Wow,
There's
real life
nothing wrong
example
with
right here.
Effort. Yeah, is trying to take what life gives you in any conversation, and I know we should pull back focus here and do a little intro, but, this is what's happened every time we've talked now, is we just keep going and going and going. And I think that's what happens when you as a human become free. When you have the freedom to be who you are and just want to share, and you trust that the person you're talking to wants to receive, but there's this constant pivot, right? Who's got more energy? Who gets to take the stage? So now I'll hand you the microphone and we'll get an intro going.
Yeah, well, and so, we'll get back into more of all of this, but before we do, appreciate that, I do want to just make sure, what is there that you want to share that's exciting or that you have going on that you want to just make sure people know about?
Well, definitely just send them to my website, which is www.insightsoccur.com. I mean, my life is pivoting, so drastically right now. I've regained my health in a number of ways, but I'm also trying to be really sensitive to not overdoing. So I'm offering a lot of online stuff. I'm going to start doing weekly group sessions where we have conversations like this, where people can come, show up, learn about well-being philosophy and how to think differently about anything. So those are very reasonably priced. And I also give, individual sessions. So really just check out my website and sign up to work with me, or, show up to a group call and learn, what's going on in the world with Deb Helfrich.
I absolutely love that. And for listeners, Deb and I had a great time to catch up yesterday for quite a while and talk through all sorts of insights. And definitely I love your website name, because that is basically how the entire conversation was. Insights were occurring the entire time. And I think if you wonder what you would hire Deb for, or how to work with Deb, or how Deb can change your life, just that example that we just walked through, which was not planned, where I said, well, I had this idea, and you said, yeah, but look at it from this angle. And that makes me think, okay, well, what have I been pushing too hard on? What do I need to step back and see where the water flows to? Because there's an ocean out there that I want to get to. And if I stop fighting the current and actually just follow the flow, I'm going to have that abundance of success and opportunity that's right there waiting for me to join into.
See, I love it. I love it. And so you just demonstrated how when you can think differently, that framework, because you just did it. You just pulled that whole metaphor forward in like the most perfect, precise way that anyone can now see the image. They can see this dance that we're sort of doing verbally, even as intellectuals on a podcast. The more images you have, the more the person, because, I'm moving back and forward in my seat. That embodiment, right, we've now learned this. Like, this is now something that we're going to use the next time, which is going to be like 30 minutes after we get off the call. Life is going to throw us some curveball, and now we've got the curve in our body. We've got the pivot, the movement, that somatic embodiment. When you move, as that object comes towards you, you get your center of balance, and you're ready to catch it. If you freeze, and if you stay rigid, or you even try to rush towards it, who knows what chaos will happen?
Right.
You're not
and if
in
you
balance.
think about, and I'm picturing, as you were talking about being rigid versus moving, and you think about even materials that are more pliable versus rigid, and the longer something tenses up and stays rigid, the less flexibility it has. And so at first it's going to seem unnatural or not that easy to change your thinking, but it does. The more you practice, the more pliable you get, so you can move on the fly. Because I would tell you there's a time where I wouldn't have been able to react to that thought process that quickly. But the last few years, having gone through a lot more life changes and things, it's changed my thinking enough that I've learned to accept other ideas and thoughts in a way where I can say, okay, what parts of this do I need to bring into my life? And it doesn't mean that I just change every time someone says something, because I have my boundaries and my foundation. But from there, what parts do I need to say, okay, there's some good stuff here to pull in?
Well, what I just have to say is, the chaos in America is happening because we're trying to end a conversation being right. But the success of a conversation is that it keeps going. Right? Until it reaches a natural denouement, right? When you're really trying to communicate, you want a conversation to continue. All of the chaos out in America, in our media, and everything that's going on, people are trying to end conversations. I'm the best. I'm the most petty tyrant. I'm right. This is how. There's no communication, right? That is the problem. We have to have this movement. You have to show up with this ability to work with what's showing up. And that is how we stop being such an angry, tense society. We've got to learn to bring the movement back in to what you don't show up just to yell at somebody. And it feels like that's really the tone of America right now in so many places, in all these ways, is people are just shouting.
And it's ironic when you step back and listen. Yeah. And what's so interesting is when you step back as a third party in those situations, people a lot of times are arguing for the same base value we need to treat people well, we need to do this, but the way that they think that they need to get there is completely different. But they're both pushing against that boulder to stick to their guns, and yet if they actually found some common ground and actually just started having a conversation about, okay, where are we in line? What do we agree with? It could be as simple as we both like chocolate ice cream. Okay, we have something there that we like, right? So let's sit down, both have a bowl of chocolate ice cream, and then let's talk about the next thing we might have in common. And maybe that's that we don't want people hungry and dying on the streets. So now, how do we solve that problem? And what are some things that we have in common that if we know we want that problem to go away and we don't want humanity suffering, then okay, this is some ideas that I have from my side, from my perspective and background, and these are some ideas that you have. We know we have the common cause. How do we get there? But that's got to be a conversation. Like you said, right now people are ending conversations because it's all about dominance rather than solving problems and finding solutions.
Yeah, and we homelessness came up a little bit before in our conversation, and I'm going to bring it back in because I feel like here's the deal. Here's the perspective, and here's how simple it is to go, wait a second, I'm so sorry. Oh, now I get it. Oh, now there's a whole new thing. We're blaming homelessness on the individual. We're creating programs to, teach them financial literacy, giving them, shower goods and packages, trying to feed them. It's not an individual problem. We have built a society where real estate industry is a skyrocketing profit model, constant, impressive gains, and salaries stay flat. That economic model ensures that homelessness is one of the major outputs. When it just gets getting more and more and more expensive to keep a roof over your head, but nobody gets any more money, people just keep sliding off of the housing ladder, as the British like to say. I mean, that's such a great metaphor, the housing ladder. Housing is a basic human need to function at any level. If we want a good society, we put everyone in a home. And we stop looking at it as though the individual's at fault. We pivot and say the framework of the economic structure and the way we did not prioritize shelter as a human need. These are what the problems are. And now let's start fixing it. How do we see that as a basic need? How do we know the society gets better? If every human is safe in a home, people will start finding productive things to do, even if they're the most lazy bum. Because humans are curious like that.
Right, and
we are
people
not
also
out to get over and to, all of the problems of society are because of the tension of how the economic system is built from corporations out. And it doesn't consider how do individuals live a full embodied life. If all the individuals are fulfilled, the society ills go away, by and large.
Well, and I think that so much of human success comes down to what, with both society and the individual. It comes down to having an individual have a chance to have some safety, security, and a sense of pride in their life, and they don't know where to start if you feel like you've been marginalized or you feel like you don't have anything to be proud of. So just having something that you can call home, you will take care of and want to appreciate, and that will build a community of people who are doing everything they can to make it a happy, healthy place for people to live.
We've gotten, we talk scientifically about these human needs. We talk about them psychologically, but that is really how the society has to be built. Right? If this is what the science is telling us, we have to look at our society and go, we need a radical intervention here, because everything is flowing downstream. Everything, all of the pressure and tension is going down to individuals and to families, and it's breaking everything apart, because we are meant to be living in interconnectedness where we have to keep, and it's not just win-win, win-win-win, that third win, that third context, that 1 + 1 is 3 is where sustainable change happens. So we can back up and, that's my big bit, my big selling point, my evolutionary logic is
right.
just
The 1 plus 1 is 3.
Yeah, the difference between 1 plus 1 equals 2, this is 100% always true. Factually, come back and count things, you're always going to get 2 of them if there's one and another one. But I would tell people that there's a, yep.
Yeah, no, I would love to have you get into that, because I had an awakening yesterday when you were explaining 1 plus 1 is 3, because I'm thinking, Deb, come on. We all know 1 plus 1 is 2. There's no way you can change math. You can't argue the numbers. Math is always right. But as you explained, I thought, wow, this makes so much sense, and I've never looked at it that way.
Yeah, so this is the framework of, well-being philosophy. This is going to teach people just this simple little math keys is how you can start making the best decisions in anyone's life for their own good, for the good of their community, and for the good of the planet. These things always replicate like that. If you really, truly make the best decision, it's going to be this thing that you can say, and it does good here, and it does good in this way. Or it doesn't do bad. Some things aren't all that flowery, but you're at least not harming things. You're doing the best you can, and you're aware of your harm. But so here's the deal. 1 plus 1 equals 2 is precise mathematical logic. And it works for inorganic things all the time. But there is a context where I can get anyone who's willing to believe in evolution to go ahead and say 1 plus 1 equals 3. And it's so simple. Just take one man, one woman, and you end up with a third baby. And that works for birds, bees, puppies, every living molecule, even the single-celled amoebas that don't need a reproductive act. 1 becomes 2, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. Life itself can be counted in certain ways where 1 plus 1 equals 3. You just have to get the right context. See, this is the pivot, is finding the context where you're arguing 2, I'm arguing 3, we stop. We say, ask one more question. I say, well, can you consider this example of a man and a woman equals a third baby? Yes, anybody, no matter how steamed and rigid they were, that they never believed that 1 plus 1 would equal anything but 2. If they take that breath with me, if they stop needing to shout at me, right? There's this whole, again, as we talk about the dynamic of the performance, of standing on a stage, where, again, I'm sitting here in my chair, but I'm moving the energy. So I
can feel the energy.
That person to just pause just enough to go, yeah. And she's not being insolent. She's not going woo-woo and crazy. She's factually, with all of the information we have on Earth, proving 1 plus 1 can be 3 if we understand and are talking about the same context.
Well, and that's what I love about it.
Powerful methodology. Yeah. Philosophy, basic philosophy, how to think about how we're thinking. And the world
that's the thing, is bringing
this.
2 different sides together.
Yeah, it's just such a joy that I was able to start to fix my own health so that I now can figure out how to go out in the world and have these kinds of discussions. I mean, I'm just so happy, that all of this has come together, but my God, it was 9 years of awkward. 9 years of frustration, 9 years of chronic illness that, I couldn't even talk about. I couldn't explain it to myself, let alone to anyone else. So most of my friends, why are you just so lazy? Right? That would be the whole, end up of all of my drama. You're just being lazy. Well, hell no, I'm not. I was ill in this fabulous way that I've now tied up a bow on, that I can say, hey, America, I'm willing to stand up and say I'm one of the first people to suffer from global warming in my own body. And I can tell you about it. I can tell you about the excess carbon monoxide in my biofield, my near-in atmosphere, that triggers my multiple chemical sensitivity. We can start measuring that because global warming is not far out in the atmosphere only. It's right here in the air we breathe. And those of us who are sensitive our intelligent body has somehow aligned these chemicals with excess carbon monoxide, and it wants us to flee. It wants us to run away from the sulfur, gases or whatever we've stumbled upon out in the wild. This creates humans like me who have nervous system imbalances. And that can't be fixed with mental health drugs. And that's the way we're looking at the perspective today. It's a mental health problem, but no, it's an actual physical, environmental problem triggering many of our chronic diseases.
And so this leads me into my next question, which you may have kind of already stumbled on, but has that been what your awkward has been, that you've had to learn how to deal with to get to where you are, or was there a specific moment that you understood it?
The awkward was I was suffering dramatically. I mean, I was locked in my body during the whole decade of my 40s. Adult onset autism is one way I can talk about this as a metaphor. But I also really see myself as a mammal, as a polar bear, with my, Arctic hued skin and my red hair. Definitely somebody who needs a colder environment. I'm that polar bear whose ice floe has disappeared. I'm the human who would suffer from global warming first. It is going to come from the Arctic downward as we get warmer and warmer and all of the atmospheric conditions change. I'm the redhead in the coal mine. And I
so
you
can feel it.
So much effort, awkward. Andy, nobody really, for the last 4 months as I've been trying to get this capacity under control, most people have just been sort of like overwhelmed with what I'm saying. I had to sort of, again, pivot a lot, go run up, on a hill and look at the performances I was giving, the conversations I was having, and go, oh, that went too fast, this went too fast, and try and come back here to the place where I imagine energetic control.
Yeah, I would imagine that your
when you're
actual,
so excited.
Right, but introducing a new idea to somebody, let alone learning about it yourself, that can be a hurdle to get over, to actually get people to understand that this is something new that not only are you dealing with, but that people need to be aware of.
Well, it's exactly it, and it comes back to the evolutionary logic. The 1 + 1 is 3. We're all 1 in 7 billion. We've done so much great work in medicine up to now, finding how we're in common when we have diseases in common, but we really reached the point where we can't keep going that way. We now have to ask, how are we still getting even much more worsely sick in common? Because the trends are we've got so many drugs, so much medicine, everything we should have, but why are things getting worse in new ways? All of these invisible illnesses, the things that are brain-based, is all about our electrical body. And we've ignored bioelectricity. And this is sort of the cutting edge of how medicine, how all thought really will change. When we see electricity as the force it is in our own biofield, everything can change. That's actually how I would explain how I healed myself. There was some biohacking, I took some of this, I ate some of that, I did this, that, and the other thing to my physical body, physiologically. But when it came right down to it, I just opened up my mind to use my memory banks a little more effectively and efficiently. And this sort of performance, this sort of, waking up at 50 and now sort of doing improv, right? Not improv to make people laugh for jokes, but improv to make people fall in love with being human, right? That's kind of what I want to help people do, is see like how I'd always loved myself. I'd always been a pretty, successful, independent person, and then I lost a whole decade of my life. And in that time, I learned. I used the internet. I learned from NASA scientists. I managed this, and this, and that connection. I just absorbed knowledge at the speed of the internet. So when I healed myself just that bit, boom, I fell in love with every monkey mind chatter that crosses my mind. And this is how I get where I can't stop talking.
Well, I think that when you talk about
everything that pops in my head, I fall in love with.
Well, when you talk about awkward pivoting, just right there when you say you lost a decade of your life, yet when you look back and you're saying, but I did this and I learned that and I went on this exploration, it's like, how do you bring that decade back into something good in your life, even though at the time it felt like a loss?
Because here's all you got to do. Look for the empowering context. It's always there. It's always
and you can apply that to anything.
And judge ourselves and feel like failures. We can embrace that failure a little bit, nuzzle it, right, with our shoulder, nuzzle up against it, and just look at that failure and say, how might that be a beautiful part of my life? What story can I tell? How do I contextualize it? Or how do I just see it as something that helped me learn this new skill? It's impossible in the very, very, moment to know why you're doing something. But if it feels true in your body, if we trust that, it will always work out.
Yeah. And I don't know if you watched Heather Younger's TED Talk about reframing and looking for the opportunity out of adversity. Yeah, and it's so spot on with this that you're talking about. And I actually had watched that a couple days ago. And a funny thing, I spilled something on the floor at the start of my day, and I thought, I'm not going to let this ruin my day and be one of those bad hair day situations. So I cleaned it up, and I thought, well, now I have a clean floor because honestly, the floor kind of needed to be mopped anyway. And so it was that whole, like you said, looking for the thing that is actually empowering or that you can use out of that moment, and to look at it and go, okay, well, this was the good that came out of that.
But I'm going to even good you some more, because this extra bit, think about the exercise you got. And I don't just mean calories and mopping, but think about what you did with your body, the extra movements you put into your morning. That somatic embodied experience, if you add, and look at what I did for my body, for my physiology, for stretching this lovely set of, the tens integrity of the human body is fascinating. I mean, that's another thing as a larger person, looking at posture, looking at movement as this incredible thing you can do that has nothing to do with the way we think of the pounding, boot camp exercise stuff. It's really just about enjoying the pleasure of movement. It's fascinating. Again, my lost decade, all of a sudden now, after not exercising for 20 years, I go and dance for 2 hours every Sunday morning. Ecstatic trance dance. Just like that. And no injuries. Just the potential was within me. It was trapped in some ways, but when I got to a certain point, a certain community, and where I had the brain capacity to let the rhythm just go through me, it's marvelous. It really is. Getting back in your body is the path to happiness.
I love that. And I hate to say it, I can't believe it, but we are down to just a couple minutes already, and I feel like we could have a 24-hour podcast. Yeah, I feel like we could just talk. We could do a marathon sometime where we just talk for a full day. But what's something that you want to leave the listeners with?
Well, I guess, right where we're at, now I'm really big on saying your body is an instrument of consciousness. In that sentence, I feel like I have given anyone who wants to pursue the meaning of that sentence the fountain of youth. Your body is an instrument of consciousness. The sound, the electricity, the flow, the rhythm, the water, the beat, the dance of life, the crescendo of talking and moving. This is how you become the human you're meant to be. This is how you get out of your awkward. You find your beat and you become it. You have it right here handy when it can help move the conversation forward. This is what it
beautiful.
We socialize this out of our children. The children would understand this, right? We taught them we didn't want this, but this is how everyone performs in life. This sort of improv beat of here, the rhythm of how my brain works and my thoughts and my body, they come together to make this big, big picture. This kind of
love that, and I love that, and I hate to cut you off, Deb, but we are gonna go over. But that's a beautiful place to leave it, because I think that's so empowering.
I think so. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing everything, both online and today. It's been a pleasure. Really, I've already had a mind shift, and I look forward to everybody else doing it. So thanks so much, Deb.
I've had a marvelous time. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Andy. You take care.
All right. Have a great day.
Be well.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening in for today's show. Be sure to visit awkwardcareer.com to continue your journey. And of course, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so they can find their awkward side and learn how to own it.